Hi, everyone. Welcome. Good evening. Just for those of you who are here, we are recording the session just to let you know, as you can see, it's being recorded. Right, so welcome to Gabungan Darurat Iklim Malaysia's Seminar Series. Tonight, we'll be talking about the shift away from cars, KL's highest carbon emitter, with Justin Lee. So I'm very honored to introduce Justin and to moderate the Q&A of the session a bit later after Justin's presentation. So a little bit about Justin. Justin Lee has a background in architecture. He currently works part-time as a freelance architectural designer and also lectures part-time at the School of Architecture at UCSI. Excuse me, sorry. Justin currently lives a car-free lifestyle and has recently started Bike Commute KL to advocate for better urban accessibility and sustainable transport. So Justin is a friend of mine. He truly walks the talk. He cycles everywhere he goes. And so he is a great person to be leading this session tonight. So Justin, without further ado, I can see you've got this great cover for your slides. Before we go into it, I just wanted to talk a little bit about that. This photo, it's part of COP26, is it?
Yes. Yes, it's part of COP26. So, okay, yeah, thanks, Yasmin, for that. Yeah, it's so part of COP's. Yeah, it's part of COP26. It's at this is at Glasgow, and they recently projected this image that this machine fights climate change. And what is that? It's the bicycle, and they're just highlighting that it also can be a tool. The bicycle can also be a tool to fight climate change. And I think it's important to talk about, about bicycles, about cars tonight, right? Especially with the GDI platform, because I don't think the subject of cars has been covered a lot from an environmental perspective. I think environmental activist groups here, in Malaysia, we tend to talk a lot about deforestation. We tend to talk a lot about waste. We tend to talk a lot about fossil fuels also in electricity production. But not a lot has been talked a lot about cars, I think. So maybe it's been talked a lot by urban planners, like during the MUF, like you yourself also. And I, as an architect myself, right, I tend to have a lot of interest in this subject. Yeah.
Cool, yeah, and a lot of people are cycling up to COP from what I've been following. So it's kind of cool timing that we're talking about this year. Yeah. And of course, your subject today will be talking about it from the KL perspective. So without further ado, I'm really looking forward to the session. So Justin, feel free to take us away.
Okay. So yeah, this image is from COP26 at Glasgow. And I think aside from that also, I think the societal space, I mean, aside from like the people in the, like you and me, right, in the urban, talking about urban planning and things like that, right, like during MUF, I think also the societal space in Malaysia has very little understanding on this issue, like cars, especially being an issue in an environmental sense, because we do live in a car-centric society, and today a lot of us also we depend on cars, and some of us grew up with cars, and if we were to somehow if the cars were to be taken away from us, right, we'd be like kicking and screaming if we were to leave them. So yeah, so today the presentation I've prepared mainly these three topics, right? Then after that, there's a lot of these subtopics. I think I went a bit over the top with the presentation slides, but we shall see how it goes. We shall see how it goes. So the first part focuses on our car-centric city and also the environmental impacts of cars, especially in KL. And after that, the next part is probably more of the solution, a potential solution, which is this machine that fights climate change. And after that, having a car-free revolution. So I think our collective dependency on cars has a huge impact on the climate. And it becomes especially evident during MCO when, like, for example, there's this data that we got from, that I got here from Think City, comparing the conditions in the atmosphere, measuring nitrogen dioxide levels before and after the lockdown. And according to Think City, this dramatic reduction is attributed to the fall in vehicle use. Emissions from vehicles aren't just major contributors to climate change, but it also affects our health. So, yeah, there's something blocking. The Zoom thing is blocking here. Hang on, to move it away. I think in relation to nitrogen oxide levels, also aside of it being a, contributing to climate change, it also affects our health. And in Malaysia, in 2012, right, around 6,215 deaths were caused by outdoor pollution. And after that, there's this graph over here that shows that particulate smoking is a lot more hazardous, and you decrease your lifespan most likely compared to smoking, alcohol, drug use, and so on. And it's something that we don't we can't see it in the air, and it's all around us in our urban environment. Even land surface temperatures have seen a significant drop with an average of 10 degrees. So you see the difference between here and here, right? There's a drop of 10 degrees. And this is sourced from NSD and UPM. Land surface temperatures, meaning meaning temperatures that's been taken off the ground. Yeah. And here are some of the locations taken in KL. So before this, I did not know that cars on the road could affect the temperature as greatly as it could, and by 10 degrees. Yeah, I'm not sure if the rest of you would be aware about that or not, but this sort of came to me as a surprise and a shock also. But what about emissions itself? Because we tend to look at it when we want to assess climate impacts, right? And it happens that transportation in Kuala Lumpur is the highest emitter, which surpasses, all these all the others over here, which includes stationary energy and waste, which also came to a surprise to me because previous research, right, maybe previous years, transportation was like number 2, and after that, energy generation was like always number 1. And when we think about burning fossil fuels, also it's like in Malaysia we are burning like I think 47 or 40 something %, right, coal and things like that, and that's where a lot of our emissions and also our fossil fuel production comes from. And once again, even if it's this high, right, cars is not spoken a lot about in an environmental sense. So these are just some of the, I think from the DBKL Climate Action Plan also, I think they sort of sourced the information from somewhere else also, like GHG emissions inventory. And this is just how many tons of emissions, greenhouse gases emissions that, transportation and so on, electricity and all that generates. Yeah, I think some of you from the, especially now that I'm talking GDI, some of you may be interested in this. Maybe I'm not. I'm personally an architect, not so much in the environmental side. But yeah, these figures I thought it might interest you also. I think there's a trend also that transportation. This is in US. This is a graph in US that transportation, the emissions is becoming dominant also as we find solutions like renewable solutions for power and things like that. I mean, this is the US, right? Transportation is still quite up there lah. Yeah. So the production gap has just released this graph last week. As countries set net zero emissions targets, set net zero emissions under the Paris Agreement, we see here that projected plans intend to produce more fossil fuels instead of having a downward trend. which needs to be consistent with this, with our 1.5 degrees increase in global temperatures. And so, yeah, this one says all right. Okay, so and so with cars, we consume petrol, so it has to do with oil. Yeah, coal is coal. I think some cars, rural cars, they use coal, but I think predominantly we use petroleum. And another Malaysian graph over here shows that this much over here, like 37% is dedicated to petroleum and other liquids. Maybe like diesel also and things like that. Yeah. So another graph over here shows that this is sort of like the split where the petroleum, how much is used for petrol and how much is used for like diesel and so on. So it's quite significant. Yeah. And I think I have other graphs over here. I think I'll skip through this because this is in US, but it's just to give you an idea. You can refer to this later, just to give you a idea. Where does our like petroleum, which sectors that is it go to, like the transportation, industrial, probably like plastic, residential, commercial, and so on, right? So this is how it splits, and I thought it was a very interesting graph to see where petroleum, natural gas, and coal, where all these sources of energy, sources of fossil fuels, where they all go to. Yeah, and this is another graph, just specifically petroleum, yeah, in the US where it goes to, yeah. So how did we get here? How did this start? Yeah. So in the 1960s, right, modernist architects started to reject the communal style in cities. For example, like what I have up here is Plan of Rome. Cities that are walkable as they have always been for thousands of years, and instead started to embrace like individual buildings like that. Buildings that are spread out and also loses the human scale. But this also coincides with the age of the automobile, right? Which enable people to go further in a shorter period of time, which also enable an urban planning to be more spread out, which is also feasible to travel by car. And what you get is this urban sprawl, yeah, like sort of like the model that not as extreme as this image over here, right? But there are some examples in Malaysia that we have an urban sprawl that's like that. Yeah. And these are some visions by early futurists of what the city could be. Embracing the age of the machine, which is, the invention of the automobile. This image over here is, I think, from Metropolis by Fritz Lang. It's a German silent film. So in Malaysia, we started to adopt the car in, say, around the 1930s. Yeah, and this is how it looked like. Then this is not 1930s. I think this is slightly later. And you can see over here at this time, although the automobile was emerging, we are still sharing the road with cyclists. Yeah, there's still a considerable amount of cyclists over here. And while also the automobile is starting to come in, I think that there's something to take note for the later parts of the presentation also. And on the right, this image over here is Federal Highway. How it used to be, it's just, you could say it's like 2 lanes. And today it has expanded to be a lot more lanes lah. Yeah. And so here is where we are now. So we really depend on the automobile. At the same time, because cars takes up a lot of space, we have a lot of traffic jams. We are building a lot more highways in hopes of making our roads more efficient. But of course, if you build more lanes and all this kind of stuff, like you just end up getting more cars, and you wouldn't end up solving the issue in the first place. So we have more cars than ever in the Klang Valley now, and it's always growing. Why? Oops, actually this one's supposed to be later. But I think over here is we should highlight also that like so yeah, so like in the Klang Valley, right, people tend to drive to work alone a lot more, and it's comparably one of the highest in the world also, and that's how you get so many vehicles on the road. So in so for example, like you have 17.5 around there vehicles on the road, and also comparing to how many households they are, right? There's an average of 2.2 cars per household. And after that, with the amount of time you get stuck in traffic, you lose this much amount of money. And the average time you waste in traffic is quite a lot less. So it's like 53 minutes average that you lose. Sorry. Okay, so this, so with increasing highways, right, it doesn't really solve the problem of congestion. And there's this thing called induced demand. Yeah, so when you create more supply, there's always more demand, and it's a never-ending cycle. The reason why we have more cars in Klang Valley also, it's because we make it easier to drive. Yeah, for example over here, for example over here, let's break down this graph over here. You can start anywhere. So let's just say, so if right now, right, our homes and everything, it's the distance is quite far away. Yeah, so you need our vehicles to sort of cover the distance. And what you have is this automobile orientated transport planning, like what I mentioned just now, which also marginalize alternative modes of transport like cycling, like walking. And what you have is this increased car traffic. Yeah, when you have increased car traffic, then after that you want to improve the infrastructure, then which also invites more cars, and after increased congestion anyways. Then after that you have all these environmental problems, right, like emission, noises, and accidents, which continuously goes up, which highways and even our road laws and everything, right, doesn't really solve the problem of accidents. It just keeps going up. Sorry, it doesn't go up. I mean, we still have a lot of accidents. It doesn't really solve it. And you have the degradation of cities and suburbanization, and yeah, and so on. And after, it's a cycle that repeats itself and it never ends. Yeah, this is another graph that sort of explains it another way. Yeah, a black hole of highway investment is somewhat similar. And I mean, if you are able to sort of suppress new highways from being built, right, you can actually from this graph over here, you're trying to reduce the amount of traffic, rather than increasing it with the actual one over here. Okay, so I think besides that also, I think increasing our lanes in highways, like increasing more highways, also doesn't solve the problem of congestion, also because you have a bottleneck problem. So when you arrive at a town or city, say, you take this super fast expressway, then after it gets to the town, right, you sort of get this congestion at tolls and so on. And also as roads come smaller. So this is the evolution, say, at Damansara Perdana, this highway. Yeah, and we see the evolution over the years. Yeah, and it gets these more and more highways. And so today it's one of the more complex intersections that we have in, I think this is PJ. I think PJ and KL combined, right? This is one of the more complex intersections that we have. So yeah, so this is where we come to, and I think we sort of let it go out of hand. So anyways, I find this a contradiction also, despite the sustainable goals by municipalities and local councils, right? And actually some also good-looking proposals that we'll see later on in the DBKL Climate Action Plan, and also the Pedestrian and Cycling Master Plan, which you'll see later, right? We are still building more highways, yeah? So I do see it as a contradiction. Sorry, my Zoom toolbox is like blocking some of the words. So highway projects under, so here are some of the highway projects that are under construction. And I don't think it's objects that really encourages a sustainable lifestyle in the future. Although we are building more LRTs and all that, right, and more public transport is getting better, but we still have all these highways that's coming up endlessly, even today. So these are all highways that's actually under construction, is coming soon. Yeah, and we have the Dash Highway and so on. Sorry, oh, okay, this one's all cut in. And okay, besides highways, right, we also have an induced demand for parking. So in my opinion also, I think parking is a problem. So if you allow for a lot of parking, right, you're gonna also allow people to use the car a lot more lah. And but of course, without proper public transport and so on, right, without public transport and so on, people have problems getting around. That's why people build car parks in the first place. But I think we should prioritize more on ways to reduce car usage, because once you build a car park here, it's gonna be here forever. And I think not just that, this is actually central suasana. And my issue with this is that it's built next to a public transport transit, which is KL Central. Although it's next to public transport, right, you spend so much money having your property next to public transport, it's you're still, you still want to own a car. So I think there's a sort of obsession also in comparison to overseas. Although they got good public transport, I mean, this is the potential that a building, for example, like the St. Mary's X, right, has capacity to accommodate for 4,000 workers. But it only provides like four disabled car parkings. Yeah, so it's a big difference from like a private condo and a public building like that in the UK. But anyways, we'll talk more about that later. And also in Tokyo, they're limiting parking in Tokyo because there's the rates of parking in Tokyo is a lot higher, and the space for parking in Tokyo is also a lot higher. Yeah. Another point also is that people are driving a lot more. Also, they're not giving up their cars despite having public transportation. Also, because there's this news article that came out a few months ago that shows that we are buying a car in Malaysia is cheap. Yeah, that's why we sort of incline to car usage also. And okay, talking about highways, right? So I think, so I was saying just now, we sort of allowed like all these highways to happen. I think and later on I'll be talking about movements overseas that protest against highways. Yeah, but we sort of let all these highways happen. So it's under construction now. It's hard to reverse them. But I'm currently volunteering with the Say No to PJD Link group. Yeah, so it's a group of residents in PJ, right, concerned about this highway proposal. Yeah, that sounds like it's going to be happening soon if we don't do something about it lah. So this highway runs from Bandar Utama, then after that cutting through Petaling Jaya and Petaling PJ Old Town also, all the way to Bandar Kinrara. And this highway is an elevated highway. And And also it's a tolled highway at few sections also. So I think highways, right, they tend to appear, then after that we don't have time to react to them. And there's not a lot of visuals, you know, informing people of how the highway would look like. What's the impact of a highway also? So I've created some images, right? So the people around here would, I mean, with the Say No PJD group, created some images, right? So that people around the highway can be more aware about the impact, yeah, which comes to noise, yeah, and after that few years of construction risk, and it doesn't really serve the people who are living around the area also. It serves people more, right, who needs to travel from, let's just say, from far away places like Kinrara to, you know, a faster way to another highway as, you know, as fast as possible, but it doesn't really connect to the immediate neighborhoods also. And the reason why I'm against it environmentally also, there's this thing with induced demand. Yeah, with more vehicles also, once again, you increase emissions, you lower your what's that? Yeah, it's a big environmental footprint. Yeah. So at the moment now, right, we have like 2060 protests submitted. And what we're doing is we are also on the ground, right, giving out banners so that to increase awareness. But at the same time, we are also doing online protests, also raising the awareness online, doing roadshows and all this. So what do we do with all these protests? So our team, like Chiwe, Billy, our team, when we approach, for example, like politicians, aduns, or even municipalities, or even authorities and so on, right? Whoever that's involved in the highway, who's involved in approving the highway, right? We get something to show them that that people are against it, you know, that we are not alone against this highway. So I think 2060, maybe, I'm not sure it's a lot, maybe it's not a lot compared to, for example, like forests, the protests against like against like deforestation and so on, you know. But I think like highway projects like that has a big environmental impact also. People end up using more cars. So I think people would need should have more environmental awareness about this, and also chip in, and also, you know, protests also be against like new highway projects in Malaysia. So aside from that, right, aside from that, we have electric cars also. There's a topic of electric cars being a sustainable alternative, you know, a sustainable mode of transport. And I think if looking at the Ministry of Transport, you know, they have electric vehicles, or EVs, right? In short, are quite high up in their agenda. Hang on, quite high up in their agenda. And but is there, and okay, so recently with this news also, yesterday, these tax incentives, you know, encouraging sort of like encouraging the use of electric vehicles. Yeah, but do they solve the climate crisis? Yeah, they may. So immediately, you know, you may think that they reduce emissions because there's no smoke, it doesn't burn fossil fuels. But you know, where is the energy of electric cars coming from? It comes from the grid, and the grid, our electrical grid, right, is not clean. You know, it's powered by coal, it's powered by natural gas. So actually, EVs are not clean either. And I think aside from that, also there's also its batteries. Yeah, there's you think about uranium and lithium mining overseas for batteries, and the batteries also have lifespans, maybe around 20 years. Then after that, it gets disposed. And when it gets disposed, you got a waste issue. How do you dispose them? And after that, in the end, right, electric vehicles are not, it's not as much better than fossil fuels and all that. Also, maybe it's a bit better. I'm not sure, but there's a lot of these problems that comes with electric cars also. And I think over here, I think the problem is that we have this carbon tunnel vision. Why we are sort of like supporting it, we try to encourage it a lot, is because we are just thinking about carbon emissions. But there's a lot of these other problems that comes with EVs. Yeah. Aside from that, also, it's not just vehicle emissions. There's resources and materials that goes into pavement, building pavements, and after that highways and everything. The urban heat island effect, impervious surface runoff. That means we lack water drainage. Also, we have a stormwater issue also. Particulate matter. So if you drive, there's a lot of residue from the tires and brakes, and so on. Yeah, there's so many things, there's so many problems that comes with vehicles. So now I'm going to talk about bicycles as one of the alternatives to an alternative form of transportation. Yeah. What are some of the challenges in Malaysia? Obviously, our city is not dense. Obviously, our city is a bit spread out, but how can we apply it in Malaysia? So I was trying to break that down for you over here, because I'm also living a car-free lifestyle. And obviously the bicycle, right, as you pedal, it doesn't release any emissions. It's emission-free, but maybe there's some, there's a bit of emissions in the embodied energy to create the bicycle. But comparatively to vehicles, right, which is big, the amount of steel and all these kind of stuff to build vehicles and the batteries and so on, right, it's a lot lower comparatively. So that's why, for example, Scotland is promoting the bicycle at the moment. So we gotta be aware about cyclist types first, because it's sort of like a hot topic now among cyclists in Malaysia. It's something to be aware about our image and also about the cycling conditions in Malaysia. So we have everyday cyclists, yeah, bicycle commuters that wants to get from A to B, and to I think all these over here, right, they're trying to get to A to B. They're trying to get things done with the bicycle. Even these ones also. Then after that, there's another spectrum over here, which is sport cyclists and also recreational cyclists. So people cycling for to improve their health, and also to go further distance during the weekends. Yeah. And can you guess which sort of cyclist, what kind of cyclist is sort of is dominant in Malaysia, dominant in at least KL and all that, so it's the sport cyclist lah. It's the recreational cyclist. Yeah, not so much on bicycle commuters and everyday cyclists. Although, in Malaysia, we used to, cycling commuting was our main form of transport for all cities in the past. But today, right, because we've gone through, increased traffic and everything with cars, right, and people taking up cycling again, they tend to go to sports and recreational cycling. And with excuse me, one. Okay, so and after that, right, so with sports cycling, it's a very different type of cycling because they go further distance, right, and also they go faster also, and this is sort of like the perception image that we have in Malaysia today. And that's what we talk about in Malaysia when we talk about cycling. When we have cycling groups and all that, that's what we all talk about. And in the news, why it's important is because in the news lately, right, there's more laws, there's more news on cycling recently, and it doesn't really apply to may not really apply to commuter cycling that cycles shorter distances. And cycle shorter distances, and also just cycle essentially also. But some laws that came out recently say, for example, there are people cycling dangerously, very fast and dangerously, sport cycling behind on highways, trucks, and all that. So therefore, cycling on highways have now been banned. Although the term highway, right, is not, if you look at it into it further, it's also uncertain. There's like different discussions going on, right? There's difference between expressways and highways and so on, and it doesn't really apply to all highways. Yeah, so there's a possible generalization of all these cycling types, right? Whether you're commuter and all that, as a sport cyclist, and also there's and I'm referring to this also because car users, right, tend to see cyclists as a problem. Yeah. And when there's laws and things and things like that, right, it's mostly done by car users. So there's high stigma and restriction on cycling, despite higher car and motorcycle accidents. Yeah. Although it's important to be safe, right? But the media attention on cycling is a lot more now compared to cars and motorcycles, right? Although they are a lot higher, it's by the number of cases is like, by 500,000 and so on. I think we have like the top 20 road fatalities in the world. Yeah. And I think around 2019, it sort of have come down because of COVID. But it's still quite high nonetheless compared to cycling. Why is it a problem? Also because it's the news sort of creates a confusion, because what we have is some urban disconnect in our city, and for example, some people, they don't have a choice, right? But to we lack connection and things like that, and they don't have a choice but to cycle on it, cycle on the highways. And especially there's some areas near my home also where the LRT tree is being constructed, and there's just no way around it. There's no choice, especially if you don't own a car. Stigma to cyclists that doesn't belong on the road. Also, we used to share the road, and once again, because there's higher number of cyclists, right? The cars thinks that they have the right to the road, and they therefore think that cyclists don't belong there. This image over here shows one video of someone cycling with a baby carriage in KL, and after that the car driver was very angry. So, and sometimes cars tend to drive very close to cyclists also to intimidate them. So it's just a reminder that that some roads, right, especially at lower speeds, and especially where there's nowhere else to cycle, right, we got to share the road with cyclists also. And the stigma, and so it's important also the perception about cycling in Malaysia, because in Europe, right, cycling is seen as something that you commute from A to B. And during the coronavirus, right, because the amount of because of the coronavirus, right, people started to use public transport a bit less because it's in a tight conditions. They realized that cycling is as an alternative, because you don't have a lot of contact. With the cycling boom, also there's boom in cycling infrastructure also. But on the other hand, Malaysia, right, is the other way around. Yeah, we have a cycling ban in it was banned, at least in the headlines. Yeah, if you read into it closer, actually, it only applies to sport and recreational cycling actually, but the title and also the news article is very misleading. Yeah, but nonetheless, we now see a boom in cycling in KL, recreational cycling in KL post-pandemic. People who weren't cycling, they now picked up cycling, and there's increase in cycling sales. although it's recreational cycling, right, it's also a good thing because I think it takes time for people to get confident on the bicycle. So if you are wondering how to start cycling, right, how to start commuting, maybe, recreational cycling is not a bad thing, to sort of gain your confidence and also to improve your wayfinding. Yeah, so this is so what are utility cycling and what does it look like? Just now we spoke a lot about sport cycling and so on. Utility cycling is people who needs to cycle to get from A to B and also to get things done on the bike and also to carry goods lah. And I thought one interesting way to think about it is the 15-minute city. It's not a new idea. It's sort of it's an old concept, right? But I think it's reintroduced recently to sort of think about how we move around cities. So what's a 15-minute city is just the awareness that you can cycle, that cycling is a lot faster than walking and you can cover a lot of distance in like a 2-kilometer radius, for example. And after that, you can do your groceries, you can do your shopping and so on, and even local public transportation within 15 minutes. And this is sort of how I sort of get around thinking that to make use of my 15-minute radius. So I live around in Damansara Jaya, but I've sort of done this 15-minute map, right? It's just to create an awareness of distance because we tend to, in a car, right? We tend to perceive distance a lot different, yeah. And I tend to, for example, I tend to go to the shops and so on within this distance, yeah. Later I'll show you some images. And it has to do with psychogeography also because the way the cyclist mind map of the city, right, is a lot different compared to that of a car. In a car, right, you tend to use highways and things like that, and you have U-turns, and after that you have detours and things like that in a car. But cycling sometimes, right, it's a bit different. There are back alleys, there are housing areas, right, that you can cut through that enable you to get to your destination a lot faster sometimes. Yeah. So yeah, that's something to have your mind against around also. So to increase the visibility of like commuter cyclists, right, I have interviewed a few people. I think this is for my bicycle advocacy at Bike Commute KL. It's just a social media Instagram at the moment, but I wanted to interview people who are cycling, and they're mostly migrant workers around my area, and who live by the them depend on the bike. Yeah, I think there's some people who think that you need money or you need to be a different social class, right, to cycle or to commute to work. But I don't think it's necessarily true lah. So I can also cycle to work, and I can also do utility cycling. And also what's popular over here is also amongst the migrant workers. And I think e-bikes also, like Christy is a local over here, and e-bikes is one way that she used to get around without needing to put in a lot of effort also. I think if you are concerned about cycling a long distance and things like that, right? And also with our hills and terrain also, like e-bike is one way to assist you in your pedaling also. I think other other cyclists that we have in KL, right, who who doesn't just commute for sport and all that, right, is like bike messengers who use utility cycling. I mean, who utilizes utility cycling is like bike messengers like Velo Express. And aside from that, we have Bike with Elena also. And what I thought was interesting with Bike Elena is that got to listen to her talk recently, and she uses cycling tourism as a means to convince authorities to improve cycling infrastructure in roads, right, that they are filled with cars, right. She's like trying to increase the number of cyclists, increase the visibility of cyclists on the road also. in a way to advocate for better cycling infrastructure. And it's something that she gathers the data, and after that present it to the authorities. Connect the dots between, so this is how I sort of live with the bicycle. I do my groceries on the bicycle. So I live a zero waste lifestyle also. So I go to like new zero waste store I bring my containers and so on, and refill my food, soap, eggs, whatever, from there. And also, being aware of like other shops also, not necessarily the groceries, not necessarily the supermarket, but also like some of these side road shops also, where you can stop very easily on the bicycle, and also you can just put the food into the basket. And I think on the right over here there's a swimming pool also. I took the train with the foldie at night and go to the swimming pool with the bicycle. And this is, I'm sort of doing everything with the bicycle already lah. But that's just the foldie. Some people think that, I can't get around if I don't have foldie, then how? So I also have a full-size bike, and I also I'm freelancing at the moment. I maybe freelance at the cafe, then I cycle there. Restaurant, when it rains, how? So I have cycling gear, I'm always prepared. And some of these I'm like inspired. For example, this rain gear also I'm inspired by cycling. I go cycle touring in like other countries like Vietnam and all that, and that's where I got inspiration also, because a lot of people there, they cycle in the rain like that. It's also a tropical country, tropical climate. Grocery stores also, something like that lah. With another bicycle. And with my zero waste lifestyle also, I tend to not use any plastics. And I tend to taste the price tags on the box or my hand or something like that. So I think that the zero waste lifestyle, which is very popular now, right? It's been made popular. It's quite popular now with the zero waste community. There's a lot of awareness, and I think it goes, it complements, like, I think cycling complements it quite well also. But nonetheless, there's challenges with utility cycling also, with me getting around. And for example, there's an urban disconnect, right? For example, say uptown over here, and where I live at Damansara Jaya, there's a big, huge highway over here. And can you guess how many lanes of highways we have over here? It's not a Q&A session, but it's okay. Like I just say now, there's like 11 lanes maximum. Just the highway alone. And you add these two, it's another altogether 13, but it's not part of the highway. So you have to cross this. And right now over here, I've taken this picture from a pedestrian bridge. It's a safe way to cross, right? But you have to always carry up and down your bicycle. And if you have a fully loaded bicycle like me, if I'm carrying stuff like my laptop and things like that, it's hard, it's heavy, and it's not something that everyone can do. Aside from that, you got all these obstacles also, like pavements, broken pavements. It is a lack of connectivity and barriers and so on. So these are some of the challenges I face. But I still can overcome them because I think I'm an experienced cyclist. But I'll talk more about that later. Why we need better cycling infrastructure. I think this one. I think this one, go through this quickly. Learning from the Klang KL motorbike way, right? We have sort of some precedents in Malaysia, in KL itself, right, of how to cross like a busy highway. And I think if you get to cycle between here to Klang, actually it's a motorcycle lane now. And you see some of these bridges all along the federal highway, and it allows you to cross all these highways like seamlessly. And it's magical, to be able to cross, all these highways, right, without all these obstacles and all that. So this diagram shows how it used to be, in the 1980s, right, where in the past, where it's a lot more easier, there's priority to pedestrian and cycling. And in the present, right, the priority is made more towards the car. And that's why cycling, walking, and bus and public transport has become less attractive now. And I think we need to change that. I thought DBKL right, has an interesting study on improving pedestrianization and cycling. So for example, comparatively, right, existing walking, cycling mode demand among major Asian cities, right? For example, like Hong Kong is the most accessible, and there's more demand for walking and cycling also because their public transport is very good there. It's very dense. The city sort of forces them to do that. Tokyo 82, Singapore at 67%, and KL is very low. So there's not so much demand on cycling and walking because everyone's driving lah. And there's a survey over here that shows, primarily out of 1,320 respondents, right, a lot of them fear personal safety and unsafe traffic. I think I'll speed up a bit, right, because I think I sort of went a bit too long at the start, yeah. And in the survey over here, right, there is 82% of people who never walk, cycle, or walk or cycle to school, right, in KL because they can't leave the car. Yeah, and amongst those, there's 9 people who are interested and concerned, enthusiastic and confident, who may consider it. People who frequently walk, cycle to school, but in a safe manner. And after there's the strong and fearless, which is the 1%, enthusiastic, adventurous cyclists, and also climate conscious also. So that I happen to fall under that category. But there's a need, right, with infrastructure and so on. Not just infrastructure, but also behavioral change, also and so on, right, to increase this number. So DBKL has sort of like a plan to improve that numbers, right, from, let's say, the 80%, 82% who will never leave their car, right, to 60%, over a period of time through several strategies. And the people who are, this 1% strong and fearless, right, how to increase that percentage also. They have various strategies over here. And here are some of the strategies that they have. Yeah. Okay, I think I'll skip through this short of time. Yeah, so there are a few strategic approaches. Yeah, like persuading the public also, and luring the public through incentives and things like that. As number 3, convince the public, support the public, and eventually, right, forcing the public also. That's sort of like the last resort. Yeah, eventually, if you want to meet this 2028 goal. And here are some, so I thought, the plan was very interesting because you get to see also the evolution of the cycling lanes, amount of cycling lanes that they have in KL. Why cycling lanes are important is because, I didn't mention it just now, right, but it's also so that beginners and so on, right, they feel safe cycling on the road and there's better connectivity. Yeah. So that people who are under the different categories, right, would be encouraged to cycle more. And after that, in their overall, by 2028, right, this is their plan. Don't know how they execute it, but they can get this much of cycling lane by this time. This is a Taman Tun project. I think I'll skip through this, no time. Mobility and infrastructure. So according, this by 2050, right, according to the DBKL Climate Action Plan, we plan to do like around 10 kms of cycling lane a year. That's around 300 kms by 2050. But it's cannot be it's incomparable compared to like Paris, for example, who's recently turned, who has a 4-year goal to become car free. Yeah. And I'll talk more about that later. 8:50 now. 8:50. Okay, sorry, I'll go on a bit quicker. And this is sort of how it looks like, yeah. Separated cycling lanes, right, from cars. And with a barrier also, there's a lot of distance. In KL, we have the problem of cars sort of encroaching into cycling lanes. And recently they have created barriers, sort of temporary barriers, but you know, there's a lot of comments on, you know, on them being too soft, yeah, whether it's permanence also, yeah. And connect, so other than that, right, so KL is a bit, KL and the Klang Valley is a bit different. People who work in KL maybe tend to live in PJ. People or people may not work in KL. People tend to go from like PJ to Subang to work. Like I have to go to MBSJ for authority matters, also for my work. So one way to overcome that is this intermodal way of transportation. Yeah, so for example, bringing your bikes onto the train as a first and last mile solution. And you can do that as folding bikes at the moment. Yeah, so this is one way of overcoming the distance. When the trains allow this, right, you sort of have this possibility already that you can sort of really live a car-free life. But it also depends on where the train line is. Yeah, I'll talk a bit more about that later. And so there's, however, there's sort of a setback also, because the hours for foldable bikes, the hours for full-size bikes are limited. Yeah, it's shown over here. It's not 24 hours. It's not all the time that you can bring your bikes in. So there is a limitation. What I tend to do last time is, if I tend to go to work at peak hours, I use my bike only as a first mile solution. I park my bicycle at the what is this? At the train station. Then after that, I take the train to work. Yeah. So I sort of can avoid the car altogether. And after that, going to the train station, right, I used to drive to the train station, it's very jammed also. Yeah. So once again, you got urban gridlock and things like that at even not within the city center itself, around LRT lines. And after that, the other solution is when you get to your destination, if you need to go a bit further, there's bike sharing or e-scooter sharing also. So it's also called micro mobility. And one example is Trike, and they have like several locations in KL. They started off in Jaya first lah. So yeah, moving on from this, right, coming out of the pandemic, people realize, cities realize that you know, cycling is a sustainable alternative and also more efficient. They realize that cities can also transform a lot faster. Yeah, so for example, Paris recently, right, the recent news in October also, they have a 4-year plan to become like 100% 100% bicycle city, similar to like Denmark, similar to Amsterdam also. And aside from Paris also, there's a lot of other cities in Europe, yeah, that's following this car-free revolution. In Asia also, maybe they could be like Tokyo or like Taiwan. Yeah. And yeah, like this is the amount of money they're investing in it, and also the amount of kilometers and bike lanes that they're introducing in these 4 years, which is, you know, which is very different with KL, our cycling plan. I guess also people there already picked up cycling. Some population there already picked up cycling. Yeah. And that's why it's important for behavioral change and the societal space also to sort of push for this thing to happen rather than just the authorities also. And I think that's why I'm talking also now. They sort of realize that, you know, cars that occupies the cities, right, tend to take up a lot more space. Also, it's not a very efficient way to get around. And compared to buses and bicycles, right, it takes up a lot less space and moves people a lot faster. And it's also a lot more sustainable, yeah. So at the top over here is the amount of vehicles that you can get in an hour, yeah, around 600 to 1,600 an hour, according to this study. Then in the middle over here, you got bicycles in a two-way protected bike lane. Then after that, finally over here, you have the transit way, the bus or rails, right, which you can cram in a lot of people and you can, of course, move a lot of people in a shorter amount of time. Yeah. Another diagram sort of showing that also. Yeah, instead of like asking how many cars can we move down the street, yeah, move down a highway and so on, we have to ask like how many people we can move down a street, because, you know, multimodal form of street, right, can move down a lot more people. There's more alternate ways to move around. And the car lane is still here. People tend to ask, right, what if I need to do deliveries? What I need to, you know, my grandma is not well and they need to drive around and so on, right? I need to send someone to the hospital and all that. You have a lane over here that's still for cars, for deliveries and all that. It's still there, but you have this multimodal system, right, that can accommodate more people. And so I think cities overseas, right, Europe, they're transforming their roads, right, that used to be like that to be a bit more like that at the bottom. Cost benefits of cycling. There's a lot of cost benefits also as another point. Yeah, because cars, you know, they comparatively to cars, right, you have all these including CO2, including being in jams, right, productivity and so on. You tend to lose a lot of money, and at the end, right, you lose up to like 3,100 ringgit per resident in KL. In Malaysia, that's like 1.1% of our national GDP. So when I started Bike Commute KL, I sort of wanted to see how, so I want to envision how our city will look like if we sort of improve our cycling network, our cycling connectivity, you know. So this is how it would look like. You decrease the number of cars on the road. Yeah, it's a bit far-fetched. Yeah, it's a bit, at that time it was, you know, yeah. So, but anyways, yeah, it was just thinking about that. Like, it was a reaction to one of DBKL's photo when they inserted in like pedestrian crossings, a new Shibuya KL. So I just put this in just to capture people's imaginations, because they have all these plans, right, but you don't really get a visualization for people to appreciate. Yeah. So as an architect, also using some of my skills to sort of like entice people with some of these images to give people an idea. And what happens if KL becomes car free? You know, what happens if KL becomes car free? You have the space to introduce like trees, for example, to provide extra shading, because we are in a hot country, right? And also, if you see up here, I sort of put in this detail here that probably you can reduce the land surface temperatures that, you know, that we are referring to at the start. And also the air quality index is better also. Yeah, the air quality index can be better because there's less emissions and so on. And this is a 2035 thing, yeah. A bit ambitious, but you know, what if, you know, we can achieve this by then, because we have the climate crisis going on, right? And that's why we saw it's good to sort of push for these ideas. Oops, these words are not supposed to be here, but so I think we are almost coming to the end of the presentation, but I'm just gonna share like I thought the story of this is Amsterdam. I thought the story of Amsterdam was very inspiring, because similar to us, right? they weren't a cycling city. So today, if you see Amsterdam, it's now a cycling city. A big population of people there, they all cycle. But it didn't used to be always that way. Similar to us, right? The post-war conditions, right? There was an economic boom, and cities started to introduce like motorways and all this kind of stuff to make way for the cars. And this is how it used to look like. Traffic jams also. However, there's few factors lah, yeah, including the number of child deaths increasing in 1971. Yeah, it went up to 400, and people were very angry. They started to protest. Against the cars at this time. They also protested against cars because it was taking away their neighborhoods. It was taking away the quality of the urban space. And another one more point is that they had an oil crisis also at that time. Sorry, the oil crisis sort of enabled. So the oil crisis also enabled for this. Sorry, it's not part of the protest lah. The oil crisis enabled this shift to sort of happen. Yeah, oil prices went up in at this part of the world. Then after that, the affordability to drive, right? You know, it wasn't that attractive to drive anymore. And this is sort of the energy that they have, right? Bicyclists protesting against cars, yeah. Stop the Kindermord. Sorry, this one, stop the Kindermord, right? What it means is stop the child murders. And I think with this image also, right, it's interesting to show you this image also because 400 child deaths, right, compared to us, Malaysia, we got like 6,000 road deaths a year, around that average. But you know, we're not saying anything about it. But in Europe, right, they are sort of, you know, they're very strongly against it. They saw it as a health and safety problem. And slowly their roads, right, transform from being used to be pedestrian friendly to a busy car road, and to now it's a, you know, it's a cycling friendly space. And it's so safe there, right, that people can cycle that even children can cycle to work. And there's this whole discussion about helmets also, right, amongst the cycling groups, but this is something else lah. But you know, over here it's so safe, right? And the number of accidents and deaths in a year is very, very low. And yeah, so this is how they became a cycling city. And they didn't become a cycling city by itself, yeah, but it was pushed by the people also. Another thing is, you know, our urban planning mistakes, right, is not fixed, and urban planning is our city can always be transformed. And one example is Utrecht Utrecht in where's this? I lost my, not in Amsterdam, but it's in Deutschland. It's in oh, suddenly forgot the country. Sorry, where's Amsterdam in? So I forgot. Okay. Anyways, right? This canal used to be here, and after that, they transformed it into a motorway. Yeah, they sort of did not prioritize the environment. They reprioritized the car. They really thought that they needed more motorways, so they got rid of the river, of the canal. But in 2015, right, they brought it back. You know, so they sort of excavated the highway and brought back the canal. And you know, the water tables and things like that, right? After excavating, the water came back also. Yeah. So similar. So you know, like the PJD link, I was very inspired by the what is this? Like by some of these movements lah, against highways, against roads, against cars. Yeah. So I thought Say No to PJD link is something similar. Yeah. And you know, I thought we could have it a bit. I think could have something similar more in Malaysia, you know, instead of allowing for highways to happen. Another examples like closer to home is the Bike to Work campaign in Indonesia, which I'm very inspired by, because we all have the same climate. Yeah, we are the same climate, but they are now pushing people to cycle to work. Indonesia also, we have also jams and everything like that, right? But you know, I would love to visit Indonesia like soon to see how they sort of do it lah. Yeah, but this is one example which I thought was very inspiring. And also
Justin, can we wrap up soon because there were many questions that
okay.
Q&A.
Okay, I think I just skipped to the last thing. Yeah, there's a call to action. Yeah, there's a call to action, and I think, you know, oops. There's a call to action, right? So I think there's a call to action to you know, say no to highways. That's one. Okay. Aside from that, increase more awareness on the need for car-free mobility to combat climate change and also reduce the stigma against utility cyclists. Yeah, tell politicians that cycling matter. And after that, I'll end with this video. I think it's just 1 minute long lah.
Sorry, Justin, if there's a sound, you just need to connect the sound, I think, when you share. When you share screen, there's a little button at the bottom. Because we can't hear, if there's sound, we can't hear it.
Okay, thanks everyone. I think that's all. Sorry, went over time. I think I was a bit long-winded. So I should stop sharing screen now. How many people? 25 people. Oh, okay. Yeah. Sorry about that.
That was awesome. It was hard to know when to stop you because, you know, I knew that you had a lot to kind of cover and then you wanted to talk about PGD Link as well, which is a great sort of like segue into participatory planning. And I really learned a lot. And yeah, we've got 25 people here with us, a lot of questions that we can take in about 20 minutes. And I guess further on, if there's any further questions, they can always email you or connect with you through Bike Commute KL on Instagram, right? So just a bit of interaction, I guess, with the audience. I'd like to see how many people here are, you know, how many people here are utilitarian or commuter cyclists. So we've got a reaction button at the bottom. Could people just kind of put a thumbs up if you're a commuter or utilitarian cyclist, so we can have a see. Okay, so we've got nice. Can you see the thumbs ups, Justin?
Yeah, I can. Is my mic on? Yeah, I can see 1, 2, 3, 4. Nice.
Any recreation cyclists? Hybrid, cool. Vincent just messaged saying he's a hybrid cyclist. It's a bit of both. Cool. Okay, so not so many. I guess like 5 out of 25. Interesting. Okay, cool. So just to kind of get a grasp on how to answer the questions and stuff like that. No, I really enjoyed that, and I kind of liked how you also contextualized it in like how you approach cycling, looking at the 15-minute city, making it very tangible. You know, what's closest to you, how do you access those things, instead of, you know, looking at it like breaking it down into a smaller chunk to look at how to make cycling feasible. And I think one point also I wanted to kind of pick up on was this term you used, how you know, with increase of cars, marginalizes the, other vehicles, the marginalization of other vehicles. I think one of your great infographics shared that, and just how, you know, how true that is. You know, how car is kind of king, and buses and cycling and walking is kind of considered less prioritized or marginalized, less funding, less attention. If you're someone that takes the bus, you're just expected to wait 40 minutes, an hour, because you're not as important as a car user. Anyway, so we've got loads of great questions. So I'm going to take us through them. But yeah, that was really really insightful, really awesome. So you're ready, Justin, to take some questions? We've got some tricky ones. So the first one kind of talks about taxation. So this one's from Damien. He asked this kind of maybe half an hour ago. What's the ballpark? So this is the question. What is the ballpark figure of combined losses from petrol, diesel, LNG, sales taxes from sales of vehicles, annual road tax revenue, taxation paid by insurance companies that the Malaysian government would suffer if fossil fuel, private cars, lorries, and bikes, and I think he means motorbikes, are removed off the roads? So he's asking about this kind of combined losses, because it's essentially our industry, right? Cars provide tax money, and then also insurance company also contributes to that. So I mean, I have some takes to this, but what are your thoughts to this question? He's got a part 2 of the question. Maybe I'll just ask it as well. So you can answer both. So part 2 is, what are the available ideas, venues to compensate the government to recoup the above losses so that it's easier for the government to move away from fossil fuel vehicle-based revenues? So excellent question, Damien.
Okay, so let me just try to digest that question first, because I'm not super good with tax and all that, answering that. But I think combined losses from petrol, diesel. Okay, I think maybe I can answer maybe the second question a bit better. Sure. But I think if Yasmin, if you have any thoughts on this, right, you can sort of add in also, because I don't think I'm very good at, wouldn't be very good at answering this.
I think once I put tax into the equation, but it's really important, I think, to look at it from that perspective. So
correct. I think we sort of, for example, right, where we can compensate is, I don't know if I'm answering the question properly or not, but maybe like healthcare and things like that, the amount of money you lose, like, so I gave you examples over there, right? So one of them is healthcare. So we spend a lot of money on healthcare, and being in a car, right, you're less healthy, you're less active, so people tend to get sick a lot faster, right? And one way to sort of like cushion their healthcare, the funds that goes into healthcare, right, is to get people to sort of cycle, or get people to, adopt active mobility. And I think that's one way of, in terms of the economy, right, trying to save money from in that sense. I think aside from the health side is what else? Yeah, there's a few things there, like jams, there's a certain amount of money that goes, that you spend being stuck in a jam. Yeah, but I think healthcare is important. Anything else you might add, Yasmin?
No, I was also thinking along the lines of healthcare and how that's so undervalued. And I think with COVID, we're starting to reshift how we look at how we provide healthcare, how we fund healthcare. And it's very true. I mean, the lifestyle that we that cars kind of create, increases all these different illnesses. So it's all about, like, if we are going to internalize or externalize all these kind of tax kind of elements, we have to also, okay, fine, let's also look at it from all these other perspectives and look at it from a very holistic way. So if we're going to start calculating these things, we really have to start having like a very broad and holistic kind of view. Another thing would be maybe like cost of road maintenance. So with higher increase of cars, the road wears out. What's the word I'm looking for? But yeah, you have to constantly fix up potholes, etc. And that cost is actually really, really high. So how much are we paying in terms of our taxpayers' money towards that?
So much money goes into highways also. And I think the other thing I just remembered is also, what you want to prioritize in terms of your value. So there's a lot of talk now about being sustainable, about averting like a climate disaster also. So I think in terms, like, looking at it long term, right, you know what I mean, right? So there's value in sort of in looking at it that way, like in a sustainable sense.
For sure, for sure. I guess it's a complete change in how we look at taxation and revenue, and yeah, really interesting to kind of bring in that conversation, because it's always like urbanists or town planners look at it from one way, and then health is another one, and then finance is another one. But combining all of these, I think, is really, really important. I'll move on to the next question. Unless anyone in the audience has anything to say, feel free to kind of comment. Simon's just said something about the idea of reducing GDP, but again, we have to relook at how do we measure GDP. So I'll move on to the next question. Why is there, this is from Dominic, why is there little opportunity to consider and oppose highway developments? In my honest opinion, the amount of futuristic high-level road is staggering. So I'm not sure if that was more of a comment, because we were talking about highways at the time and lots of people were kind of giving some feedback. But his question is, why is there so little opportunity? What's sort of, you might have answered that already, but if you'd like to take that one.
Little opportunity in what? I'm looking for the question.
Why is there little opportunity to consider and oppose highway developments? Because it keeps happening.
I see. I think, for example, like now, I think I'm living a bit further away from the other highways, but I'm very aware about the highway that's happening here. And I became aware about it because the Say No to PJD Link people, they started putting up banners and they have a website, and that's how I got to know about it. Otherwise, I wouldn't know. I think it came out in the newspaper a bit later. And so how you're informed about it, right? You're not informed about it so well, and the community engagement from the highway developer, there's not a lot of advertisement or things like that, right? That sort of shows you what it will look like, or even that the highway is gonna emerge. It just appears. Maybe they talk about. Maybe they talk about it in the newspapers. They probably show a map with a line and everything, but it's hard to visualize the impact for most people, I think. Does that answer the question?
I think so. I mean, I think some of it was covered as well when you kind of continued in your talk. But yeah, that's definitely true. There's not much transparency in the direction of our cities. These big decisions are made without our consent. A lot of the time agreements are done like 10 years ago, and then they have to kind of make good on these promises that we were never a part of. So definitely groups like PJD Link is awesome. Kind of making it tangible, making it accessible, because when you look at the kind of local plans, etc., they're quite technical, and so it's intentionally technocratic to kind of deter people from being able to engage. So there needs to be the shift, the same way there was in Amsterdam where people started kind of pushing against. And so I think, slowly that's happening here in Penang. There's a lot of pushback that's been succeeding and creating great precedent for us. So yeah, it's kind of been a good way, a good year in many ways. But yeah, thanks. I think that answers the question. Couple other questions. So the next one's from Evelyn. So she talks about EVs, which I was going to touch on because there was a lot of commenting during that time when you brought up electric vehicles. So she brings up the topic about the announcement of tax exemption for EVs in the 2022 budget. So what are your thoughts on this? Again, you kind of shared earlier, but maybe we can
So my thoughts about it. And my thoughts about it is not so good because I think there's a lot of focus. I think also looking at some documents from the Ministry of Transport, because of doing a lot of research also, they are trying to push for EVs as a sustainable mode of transport. And I don't think but EVs has a lot of problems also. What's EVs run on? Yeah, it may not have like immediate emissions, right? But EVs are run on the electricity is power from the grid, which is also not clean. It's run on fossil fuels, and I think it's sort of like a false. It's like a false. It's like a false thing, yeah. And after that, right, you still have the problem of congestions. Yeah, you have the problem of people will still demand more highways to accommodate for the EVs. And after that, I think the other thing is mining for the batteries and the wastage for the batteries, right? There's another sustainable problem over there lah. So yeah, and once again, one person, one car, one or two person, one car, which is very common in KL. Yeah.
I mean, it does seem like an easy fix. It's the way that car industry is moving anyway. Most of the big brands are moving towards EV. I heard something on the radio the other day, and the way that they talk about it, it's like that's just the future, the very close future. And so get with it. So I think car companies as well, automobile industry is also kind of pushing this as well. And so they have a very strong tie to the state, to government, and so that's sort of, I think, why it's been so easy to push in our budget. I'm not sure who consented, but I think there's a lot of groups who would push for this. Shell, for example, they're also pushing for EVs. But yeah, I mean, we can't talk about it being sustainable unless we talk about energy and decarbonizing energy, and what we're doing in that direction as well. But another thing I read recently, which was quite interesting, was that electric vehicles, EVs, are actually really heavy. They're like 2 or 3 times heavier than a normal car. So you imagine the impact of an EV on our roads, and our roads are already, I don't know why they seem so fragile, but and so if you think about the impact of EVs on our roads, it's going to be quite a big problem. And I think like what you just said, it's true. We cannot have this mindset that it's one person per car. It has to be one car per family. Fair enough. But also, looking at people with different abilities, of course, how do we make sure that their journeys are not impacted? They have equal access to get around the city and things like that. So cars are not, we're not trying to get rid of them. We're just trying to think, how do we reduce them essentially? But yeah, it was interesting when all the comments earlier, if you have a chance to read on EVs, a lot of people have a lot of different views on that. Yeah, so I'll move on to the next question, shall I? So we have one from Young. His question, not a question, but contextualization. I'll just read it out. One of the diagrams of the 15-minute city is actually from Melbourne, the master plan for the Melbourne metro region. We are currently embarking on highlighting a principal cycling network and are working to remove parking minimums for building zones along the network. However, we face the same issues as with Malaysia, with cycling and public transport always being put last, and a planning minister who's really resistant to change. So I think he was just highlighting on your 15-minute city diagram from Melbourne and how, it seems great studying all these cities from here, but every city is going through similar, at different scale, at different kind of time periods, but similar backlash and issues, I think.
Yeah, I think the 15-minute city diagram, right? For me personally, the way how I use it was just to get an understanding of, say, for example, like Taman Bahagia, I showed my area, for example. It's just to get my mental mindset that, I can cover this much facilities and things like that within a certain distance to make use of that. Although PJ over here is not a 15-minute city design obviously, but it's just a mental thing. And also like in KL also, if you do a 15-minute map in KL, right, you can cover like from one side to KL to another side of KL in 15 minutes by bicycle. And I think it's something that people in the car, right, they're not very aware of, especially for me, for example, when I was young, right, my mom used to take me to Pavilion shopping and Kai Kai and all that, right? And I always thought that everything was very far away. I never thought it was possible to get from Pavilion to KLCC because I always thought it was very far away. That's how I sort of perceived the city last time. And that's how this 15-minute map sort of helped me. I think that's one way how I sort of viewed it. Yeah.
Yeah, I like how you brought up earlier the psychology of different experience when you drive and you cycle. But true, KL, I mean, KL city center is actually quite small, and once you know the Jalan Belakang and everything like that, I'd normally like to go on Chinese New Year because that seems to be like, well, pre-COVID quiet time in the city, so you can explore the city on like those kind of quiet days. But yeah, I think definitely breaking it down to this 15-minute agenda makes a lot of sense, or 15-minute perception. I mean, it's interesting that the climate action plan, just going back to that, I wanted to talk to you about that that DBKL kind of adopted. I mean, it's interesting what they have planned. They don't mention the 15-minute city. I don't think so. Not at least in the mobility master plan or roadmap that they have. But yeah, what do you think of that kind of time frame that they have, that they want to increase? Essentially, their objective is to improve street design for active mobility and also kind of connecting it to pedestrian networks, right? So any comments on the climate action plan? I know you shared a lot about it, but do you think it's enough or?
Yeah, so it's 10 kms a year. So comparatively to Paris, right, it's not a lot lah. 10 kms a year. Paris is planning to do like 100 something kilometers in 4 years. And I think it also has to do with the people also, like the society hasn't really it takes time for society to pick up, say, cycling or walking in KL. To have this modal shift, it takes time. So I'm not really sure, ideally, right, you want this to happen a lot faster because of the climate crisis. So I guess that's why I'm also having this talk with you guys here. I think there's a need to sort of a need for more awareness, a bit on the software level, on a societal level, right, to sort of accept, say, cycling, to adopt cycling a lot faster, so that there's more demand, and you can after that push DBKL. They have a reason to probably introduce more cycling lanes and whatsoever like that lah, to increase connections and things like that. So you know what I mean. So I think on the software side, right, I think the society needs to also somehow adopt that shift. And it's hard also. It's a chicken and egg thing, right? People won't go out on the road to cycle and all that because it's not safe. Yeah, they don't know how to cross this highway. They ask, are you trying to get me killed? Cycling on this road. But I mean, maybe at least after this talk, right? Maybe if you don't cycle, even if you could just push for it, right? Create more awareness. At least accept the need for all this, right? And after that, try it out later. Maybe that helps also, So yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, hardware is one, but the cultural shift, and I think seeing more people cycling is really promising. It's really kind of positive when you see someone else that looks like you, especially, like not a male, kind of standard cyclist, or not, someone your age, I mean, I was surprised you saw someone with carrying their child. That was, I've never actually seen that. But yeah, things like that kind of change the perception that, okay, you know what, it's possible, but how do we make it that it's not a life or death sort of choice? So I think also interestingly that you brought up the pedestrian and cycling master plan that the DBKL has. There's those 4 categories of cyclists, and like I think the extreme one is like no way, no how, they would never do it. And then like the opposite is like, what is it, like enthusiastic and confident, strong and fearless. I mean the terms that you have to be a cyclist here is actually, I mean, you have to be very ballsy, and you have to be very strong. So yeah, definitely. Also, just I think just shifting cultures is like you said, it's something that takes time. It's something that Amsterdam really does really well as well. And in the climate action plan, they do, so the climate action plan is available online. If anyone's interested, C40 Cities published it. They are also talking about doing things like public campaigns on walking and cycling once a year, parliamentary walkability assessments with residents per year. So they have all these kind of plans in place. So now that it's been published, I think it's up to us to, to ask from DBKL every few months, like, okay, when's it happening? Because I think sometimes they need to see that demand, that push from community. I realize we're running a little bit out of time, but we have 2 more questions, if that's okay with everyone.
Okay.
So Evelyn asks another question, which I think is really interesting, about our fetishes. Malaysia is a country that fetishes cars. People often extend their identity and attach status to cars that they drive. What do you think about this car culture, and whether we are able to build enough public pressure to democratize road space for active mobility?
I don't know. I think that also depends on how hard we push for it, how awareness we can push for, because at the moment, I mean, the reason why I'm having this talk also because I don't think there's enough awareness about this, this car-centric fetishization. We don't realize it, right? Because we are so dependent on it, and people don't think about it a lot. And I don't know, what do you think about this? Whether we are able to build enough public pressure. I think it's possible, yeah, if we all work together to create more awareness. I think, for example, the zero waste group, I think, with subjects like deforestation and things like that, right? Waste deforestation, it picked up a lot of traction from the climate activists. Yeah, they can gather a lot of petitions and things like that, right? To sort of stop the gazettement of Kuala Langat and things like that. So I thought it's very interesting that, that all these awareness and all these protests enable that to happen. But cars, right? The subject cars is sort of a stigma and sort of a taboo, and I think if you're able to sort of make cars look bad through this awareness, right? Through, somehow similar process, right? Then maybe, yeah, we could able to create enough public pressure. Does that answer the question? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
It's your thoughts. It's really interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess maybe also looking at it at changing, pressuring maybe at the local level rather than the big scale federal kind of level. So within your community, start cycling, start demanding for better infrastructure, or start cycling with your group of neighbors to show, look, there's a bunch of us here that it's actually a feasible and nice way to get around. So that's sort of maybe another way to also look at it. But yeah, definitely great response there. So there's a last question from Simon that I'll kind of end this with, which I think kind of gives us a bit of like tangible sort of how do you, so the question is, it took him a long time to find out about the River of Life cycle pathways. How do we get Google Map to activate cycling modes to provide this information to more people? So yeah, so maybe some kind of thoughts on that, and maybe a final message from you, if that's okay.
I think, what is this? I mean, if you're able to collaborate, of course, with some tech people, with Google or something, right, to create a cycling map online, I mean, on your phone, because, we have an analog one. Jeffrey did an analog cycling map, which was fantastic, but it'll be good, and it's more accessible to more people, and and also relevant to updated to current times, that we could somehow collaborate with someone to sort of put these cycling routes onto the map. But also, there's this lack of connectivity also. I understand that people, take people long to find out that it's cycleway because it lacks connection. I don't know how to get to the River of Life, for example, or like Mid Valley. It's like very crazy, it's to I don't know, the connection. I don't know if you've been to Mid Valley cycling, right? But the connection in Mid Valley is a bit complicated. So I do understand that people, and yeah, okay lah. So in short, the answer is to collaborate lah, I think. Yeah.
Totally, yeah. I think that's a great sort of and message to collaboration is key right now, because we are a small percent, that we're trying to build to grow. But yeah, definitely check out Jeffrey's cycling map. I've shared that Studio 25 map. And if you can join cycling groups, I guess on Facebook, a lot of people share tips if you're trying to get somewhere. But yeah, I think having more of these conversations is really important. Having these conversations with our local councillors is very important as well, because they essentially are given budget under their annual kind of plan that they are supposed to increase sustainable mobility. Technically, they're actually given a budget by the Ministry of Housing and Local Government for bicycle lanes. So that's something that we can definitely tap into. I'm always trying to find ways to push things from different angles, but yeah. So yeah, I think any last thoughts, Justin, before I wrap up? Or last message.
I think no, I can't think of any.
Even
but
at all.
I think I just wanted to, yeah, I can't take anything myself unless it's a question, but it's okay. Yeah, I would like to thank Nadra also from Bike. I didn't get to thank her earlier. Supposed to do that earlier, right, during the presentation, but I'd like to thank Nadra also from Bike Commute USM in Penang, because her platform also, she gathers a lot of articles, right, a lot of interesting facts and things like that. And I've referred to that a lot, right, to sort of put together this presentation. So I just want to thank Nadra also from Bike Commute USM. It's you all should check her out also. She's also another cycling advocate. And I think for myself also, starting Bike Commute KL, I'm trying to also increase awareness about cycling, trying to inspired by, like Zero Waste Malaysia and also Kami, right? It's interesting how they made the information, they broke down the information in a way that is you can digest, So I'm trying to do that for cycling also. So yeah, you can check Nadra's Instagram, you can check my Instagram out. And yeah, that's all.
I'm definitely inspired by your daily posts. You and Dr. Nadra both really, it's really awesome.
Yeah.
It's kind of a good kind of collection of everything that's being shared online on cycling. But yeah, thank you so much, Justin. That was incredible, and I'm glad this is recorded. I think there's so much that we can learn and build on from here. And thank you for everyone who joined us this Saturday evening and asked all these great questions. And yeah, hopefully see you on the road, see you at cycling events. Hopefully, if you guys are in PJ, anybody, and if you do cycle, have fun, be careful, and reach out to Justin and Nadra for any tips. So, and also the slides are going to be available, right, Justin? You're going to share.
The slides are the slides are available. I think also Darren's gonna, it's also recorded and it's gonna put on somewhere, maybe YouTube or something.
Yeah,
I think
the YouTube channel.
Yeah, I think we had some good questions over here, but if you all thought the presentation was a bit long-winded or something, you want to edit it, right? Because now it's, I think it's a bit long-winded. You can edit the video, I guess. Yeah. Okay.
Very, very insightful. All right, cool.
Okay.
So thanks so much, everyone, and take care.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.
Bye, Justin.
Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.